Okay, we should be good to go.
All right, I should start now.
Yeah, I believe so. Go right ahead.
Okay, all right, everyone. Welcome to this webinar this evening. Thank you, all of you, for showing and taking time out of your busy day to listen to this webinar. And we have this special speaker, Mr. Glenn Plantone. He's going to talk about the commercial flipping opportunities. And Glenn and I has gone back, way back, actually, around 10 years ago. If you may not remember, Glenn, you came to my club meeting in Fremont, California. You did some presentation for my members at the Fremont Senior Center, a quite large venue back in 2004, 2005. And yeah, so Glenn and I have a good history going back, way back then, and we did some deals back then, and last 3 years we lost track. I don't know why. I got busy, he got busy, and now then recently I thought to myself, wow, I mean, Glenn already has some great opportunities that he's doing over the years, and I thought, my investment database, we've been promoting, the typical turnkey, long-term buy and hold investment properties all these years, and I thought to myself, let's do something different. Let's find some other ways to make money. And I thought about flipping. So I contacted Glenn about a month ago, and I'm glad that I did. So, so this is very exciting. Glenn is truly an expert at commercial flipping. And this 1 hour presentation, hopefully, well, you will receive a lot of value. And if something like this fit your goals and objectives, you can, after the webinar, you can contact myself, you can contact Glenn, and we'll work with you to help you. So, but some housekeeping as well. You may, toward the end of the webinar, we can open up for question and answer. There's a live chat box at the bottom right-hand corner. So you guys are welcome to type in your questions, not only toward the end of the webinar, but even at the beginning, but we're not going to answer the questions until towards the end. Okay, so without further ado, let me have Mr. Glenn Plantone take it away and present your outstanding opportunities. Glenn, take it away.
Hey, thanks, C-Wing. Yeah, appreciate it. No, and we never really lost touch. I mean, we went a few years without communicating much with each other, but in real estate, you're doing your things. And one of the things that I, believe it or not, won't talk too much about, but we can always touch back if I talk to anybody individually, is about my history over the last almost 15 years in real estate, because I've changed quite a bit. I go with the flow of the market, and you'll see that I've graduated from residential into commercial, and I think you guys will like what you hear. But let's roll through it. So you see my first slide, and take a picture of that if you like, snapshot, whatever. You've got my contact info. I can also share the PowerPoint with C-Wing, and he can distribute it to anybody that's on the PowerPoint or on the webinar tonight. No problem. I don't mind sharing it. So that's me. That's my contact info. I've been in Las Vegas since 2003. And let's move on to slide number 2. There we go. So Glenn Plantone, commercial investing under $1 million, the undiscovered niche. And that's what I call it, because when I discovered this, I'm not seeing a whole lot of competition, and I've done very well with it in the almost 2 years that I've been doing it. So I think you guys will like what you hear. So let's walk through it. So the niche that I found, the reason I think I found the niche is because of this. Most investors are either they're playing in residential real estate like I did for almost 15 years. They're either doing flips or they're doing buy and holding, and that's what they're doing at. And most residential real estate is under 200,000 in this market, Las Vegas. In your market in San Jose or wherever you might be, it could be a lot higher, but it makes it a little more challenging because you need more money to do it. But there's a lot of competition in that market. What I found is that for commercial, most people don't look at the under $1 million commercial market. It's just too small for big investors. So they're looking at the 2, 3, 4, 5 million, 10 million and up, and nobody's looking at the under million. And that's what I discovered, as I said, about 2 years ago, and I've done pretty well with it. So what I do basically is I negotiate great prices. I pay cash. I close quick. I take the property off the hands of the bank. Generally, it's an REO, a bank-owned real estate-owned property. It could be a hedge fund that owns it, that bought it as a bulk sale, and I'll explain some of those deals a little bit later. But I take the risk away from them, and I repurpose the investment by either re-renting it to somebody else, or re-renting it back, if it's a bank building, back to another bank, repurposing it, subdividing it, a number of different things you can do. But that's what we've discovered. So that's the niche that I discovered. First, I want to talk about investment dollars, because one of the biggest questions I have from investors is, how am I secured? And it's most important to understand that I've got many investors that are with me, and these investors have literally invested, in some cases, over $1 million with me. Usually it's on more than one deal. It could be 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 different deals. It could be 10 different deals of 100,000 each. So they're really secure knowing that they're among many different deals. But we do it through a note and deed of trust. And if I'm buying property at a low enough price, let's say I buy a $200,000 property value at 100, and I put the deed of trust for 100 against it, the investor's in a pretty darn good position, because chances are I'm going to sell that property for 200,000. Even if I sell it for 150, it's a lot more than what the amount of money that I borrowed from that investor. So they're always secured against the investment. They're always in first position, and the property cannot be sold without paying that investor off first, because they're in first position. So keep that in mind. That's very important from a security point of view, that you guys are secured in your investment. One of the things I've been able to do in this commercial arena is that I've been able to buy properties at 50 cents on the dollar or below. Some of these are 20, 30 cents on the dollar, just phenomenal acquisition prices. But by acquiring properties at 50 cents in the market or lower, we're able to protect you guys in your investment dollars big time, again, because it enables me to have the flexibility to quickly flip the property to another investor, maybe 10, 20% more than what I paid, to rent it out at even a lower than market rent because we bought it so low, to refinance it with bank financing and quickly take the investor out, because I typically borrow money at anywhere between 6 and 12%, and bank financing is 4 or 5%. So I can fund you guys out, but having your money available to buy it quickly is the key, and that's the reason why I always look for more investors to get involved with this. So that's the reason I get them so good, is because I buy them so cheap. So getting on to the guaranteed interest rates, we structure every deal differently. Typically, I'll buy properties at such a big discount that we can guarantee interest, and again, it can be 6 to 12%. We can pay this quarterly, we can pay it monthly, annually. We can defer it till the end of the deal. It really depends on each deal and what your needs are. If you don't need the money, and I don't need the money, then, or I need the money, let's say, to do some rehab, then it's better for us to defer the money till the end of the deal. It depends, again, how many deals we've done and how secure you are. The reason why we can guarantee the interest rate is simply because we buy the properties, again, so cheaply that we've got such upside with the property. Many of the properties are already rented, and that's one of the big things. I'll show a couple banks to you later that I've bought. And because they're rented, if I'm getting $4,000 a month in rent from a bank that I paid $200,000 for, and if I'm borrowing $200,000 at 10% interest, it's $833 a month. That's $1,667. So I'm taking in $4,000, paying out $1,667. I've got a cash flow, and then the goal is to, again, sell the property, repurpose the property, refinance the property, anything of that nature. But that's the reason why we can do that, and that's the reason I can pay good interest rates, because, I mean, 10% interest rates are very good interest rate. It's hard to find those kinds of interest rates. Most of my investors over the years have honestly been older gentlemen, more gentlemen than women. Not to say I'm discriminatory by any means, but it seems to me I've got older guys that happen to have 2, 3, 4, 800,000 sitting on the sidelines, and I'm able to put that money to work. And that typically is the typical investor I've got. Might be a 65, 70-year-old retired guy that happens to have that money ready to go to work. So let's talk about vacant properties. Many of the properties that we buy are vacant. I'd say probably half of them. And we're able to acquire them at an even lower price a lot of times when they're vacant, because in commercial investing, they base the investment, the value of the investment, on a cap rate. Well, if there's no income on the property, then there's no cap rate, there's no value. We all know there's value with a property that's sitting vacant, of course, but from the bank's point of view, if they know the lease is expiring, then there's not a lot of value, because as soon as the bank moves out, the property value goes down. So our goal, again, is to repurpose it, find another bank to move in, subdivide it, refinance, do whatever we've got to do. But most of the properties, as I said earlier, are at anywhere between about 20 to 50% of replacement value. Give you an example. I bought a bank, not a bank, it was an office building in Las Vegas back in 2015 for, it was a 6,000 square foot building, and I bought it for 350 grand. Now, my math tells me that if I take 350 divided by my calculator's not working. What's going on with that? I think it was $46 a square foot is what it came to, or 52, one of those numbers. But to build that brand new building, and this building was built in 2007, so it was only about, at the time, 8 years old, it would cost about $150 to $160 a square foot to rebuild it. So I bought the land, the building, it was in great shape, didn't need a penny of work. I had an inspection before I bought it, and I got it at 1/3 the value. So, and it was a vacant building, and that was one of the ideas I got it so cheap, is because the bank just wanted to get rid of it. So we take the risk of buying the property with no income. However, because we get it at such a low price, it gives us options to flip, rent, refinance, repurpose, whatever. So that's the niche that I've discovered. So getting on to foreclosed and distressed properties, the high majority of the properties that we've picked up are foreclosures. In fact, of the maybe 15 that I picked up, I think every single one of them, with the exception of maybe one, has been either a foreclosure or a distressed property that was bought by either a mini hedge fund, or the bank owned it and they took it back as a foreclosure. So these are definitely distressed properties from the definition point of view. Doesn't mean they're distressed in that they need a lot of work. Many of them are in great shape, but the term distressed really just means that it's a property that's been a foreclosure, that it's gone through, a bad time. Doesn't necessarily mean the property's in bad shape. So again, many are in great shape, many are distressed. I just bought a church, which is a church daycare center in Macon, Georgia, for $250,000. It's a 20,000 square foot building. Now this one does need some work. It's going to need about 50 to 60,000 in work, but let's call it 50 just for conversation's sake. 250 plus 50 is 300. Let's do some math. If you take $300,000 divided by 20,000 square foot, you're looking at $15 a square foot for a building. And that included the 3 lots across the street, which had the parking, and included the buildings, 2 buildings, 1 daycare, 1 church, stuck together, and another lot that was on the next street over. But again, many are in great shape, many are distressed. Some, as I said, are through hedge funds. One of the hedge funds I deal with bought Fresh and Easy. You guys may not know the Fresh and Easies if you're in Northern California, but if you're Southern California, Nevada, Utah, Fresh and Easy's was a grocery store that came over from England back in 2007 to southwestern U.S., and they built a 14,000 square foot structure of a really cool grocery store. The model just didn't work. They were doing okay, but okay wasn't good enough. They decided to sell off the assets. Hedge fund bought the assets. I bought a Fresh and Easy in Phoenix, Arizona for $650,000. So again, 650 divided by 14,000. I forgot, it was like 45 bucks a square foot. So again, 150 to build brand new, 46 a square foot, 1/3 the value. So those are the ideas. As I said, we're helping this hedge fund because we take them off one at a time. I might buy 1, 2, 3 at a time. They buy 60, 80 at a time. They might spend, $80 million to buy 150 bank buildings or 150 stores, and I'm only buying 1, 2, or 3 at a time. I'm not a big player, but I'm able to get good deals because they bought at such a good discount. Guys like us have the vision, the ability to repurpose 1, 2, 3 buildings at a time, and that makes it easy for us to be able to find value in the properties. So on to slide number 9. One of the other things we can do too is equity participation. So let's kind of walk through that. So we can often structure a deal that would include a guarantee of interest, and that would be lower typically than the 10, 12%. It would be something like maybe 4 to 6% guaranteed interest on your money no matter what happens, and equity profit at the end when we sell the deal. So it could be that the interest is deferred. At the end, we give you your let's call it 4 or 5, 6% interest, and you get maybe 20% of the upside when we sell the deal. And I'll walk through an example later that I've showed how that would work if somebody did that deal. So the guarantee of interest is lower, as I said here, but the money made could be much higher because you're getting a chunk of the profits at the end. So is there more risk in equity participation? No, not really. It's the same risk. It's just that many investors, like I said, the older guys really don't care. If they get their 8-10% security on their money, they're very happy with that. The other guys say, well, if I got 6%, I'm pretty happy with that. And if I can get more than that through the end, I'm happy with that too. So that's kind of what they do. What I've been doing for the most part over the last 2 years is I buy one, I flip one, I hold one. I'll give you a quick example. When we talk about the two banks later that I'm going to show examples on, one of them I flipped, one of them I'm holding. And you'll see why I do that, because if you sell and you do not 1031, then you'll pay a hefty tax consequence. If you use a 1031, which is a vehicle that enables you to sell a property, buy another property with the proceeds without paying taxes, you're deferring the taxes. It's a very good strategy. So that's the reason I like to do that. On the second part here, it says, once we have a property stabilized, rented out, or repurposed, we generally can have it refinanced, which takes you back out of it if we decide to just take you out as the financer and put you out. And then we can go ahead and hold that property long term. And you can still maintain ownership if this is an equity participation deal. Your money's back out, you stay as an owner, you got your money, let's go do another deal. So that works out really well too. If you're just a funder, same thing. Your money comes out, you're happy, you got your money back out, you got your interest, and we'll look for another deal to put you into. I can see this eventually getting to a point where if I get big enough to where we could actually offer shares in the company and say, hey, we've done well enough, let's sell some shares in the company and everybody becomes a part owner in the company. I haven't done that yet, but it's a possibility that I could do that in the future. The model works very well, and I don't see a lot of people doing what I'm doing. So if I can continue this niche, I think it should work out really well. But remember, on the second part of this slide, the rule number one, and it's the thing that I always preach, and I've talked about it 6 or 8 times, and I've got it throughout the presentation, is that security of your capital through the deed of trust is the most important thing out there. Because, and you'll see later, I've got another slide, but my investors always, and I guarantee it, they get all of their money back and their interest. I've done that over 400 times, and that's always the way it is. Even if I lose money on a deal, my investors will get all their money back and their interest. Now, people say, well, how can you do that? Well, I can do that because if I make 20 deals and 19 of them are very profitable, and I mess up on one and lose, I'm not going to let you suffer from it. I'm going to pay you what I owe you. But if I'm hitting 19 home runs and one double play and I'm out, that doesn't mean I'm losing money. I'm still doing very well overall. So keep that in mind. And I do have a list of investors that would be happy to chat with anybody if they wanted to talk to any of my references. We'll talk about that a little bit later. So let's see how we're doing on time. We're in pretty good shape. So we're about a third the way through the slides so far. So I'm in my 3rd year of commercial properties. Although I did commercial before, I've primarily done exclusively commercial for the last 2 to 3 years. And I've started doing much better at it because I really know what I'm doing. I've got the niche down pat. So I started buying lots of commercial 2015. Like I said, I'm in my 3rd year now. The niche of under $1 million properties is pretty much wide open. I'm not seeing a whole lot of activity in it at all. And I've got the skills, the ability to raise the capital. I've got the cojones to go after properties before I have the money. And that's one of the things, and one of the rules and I don't know your backgrounds, the folks that are listening, but I'll share this thought with you. If you haven't done much with real estate, a lot of people don't realize, but you have to find the deal first and do not worry about the money. Many people try to go round up the money, and when they have the money, then they'll look for a deal. Well, the problem with that is by the time you get the money, the deal's not there, or you spend all this time finding the money, and then you can't find a deal quick enough, and the money goes away because people need to put their money to work doing something else. So it's important that you go after the deal first, and I'm very aggressive. When I find a smoking deal, I always know that I'll be able to find the money to match the deal, and that's always worked out well for me. I'll give you a quick example. On the first building I mentioned, where I bought it for $350, I went in and I've seen the building. It had been vacant for about 2 years, and it was a bank foreclosure, and I'd looked at it before. This time I met with the real estate agent, the commercial agent, listed at 550, and I said to him, what do you think the bank will take for it? I know they're motivated to get rid of it. They've had it. And he said, I think they'll take 350. So I says, okay, I don't want to dick around. Let's just write it up at 350, cash, close in 14 days. He said, okay. He wrote it up. They immediately responded and they accepted the deal at 350. I immediately went out and found 4 investors, 100, 100, 150,000, and I borrowed the money. I closed on it. As soon as I closed on it, I put it up for rent. It did not rent for about 2 months. I had inquiries, but no serious rentals. And I said, geez, I should be listing it for sale too, which now that's what I do. Rent, sale, same time. Whatever comes along first, I'll take it. As soon as I listed it for sale, I sold it immediately. It took about 4 months to close. It was an SBA loan. They take a lot longer to close. Sold it for $575 to an SBA buyer. Bought it for $350. Made about $200,000 at the end of the day. Did not put a penny into it other than paying the utilities, paid the HOAs while I hold it, paid the interest at the end. Did not pay any interest on it till it was over, and I made almost $200,000. That's a smoking deal. And that's the kind of deal that once I did that one, I said, wow, this is easy. As long as I'm buying it right, this is the way to go. So since then, I've done about 10 or 15 of these deals, and I continue to do that. So let's see if I finish this slide. Yeah, so I pretty much went through most of that. So on to slide 13. Let's talk about timelines. Generally, most of these are accomplished within 1 year. And of all the ones I've had, I've gotten rid of all of them within a year so far. The reason why is because we're buying so low that we're able to do something with it. Again, whether it's refinance it, resell it, rent it out, whatever. And I've flipped the majority of these, even though I'm probably going to start keeping more, because once I flip them and have income, it's probably a better idea to keep them long term. Leasing, again, because we're buying them so low, we can actually lease them lower than market, which means it's easier and faster for us to get a renter. Now that, in essence, will bring the value of the property down. But if we're buying something at 25 cents on the dollar and we're renting it at 75 cents on the dollar, then even though once we rent it, it's valued at 75% of what it could be, was rented at full price, but it's still 3 times greater than what we paid for it. So it's still a good investment. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, we refinance or wholesale. So that's the process, and that's what we've been able to do. Getting back to security, we go with a 1-year note with a deed of trust. We can extend that after the first year. We can cash you out after the first year. It really depends on what the situation is. If the property's cash flowing, we can extend it quite easily. We can refinance out with a bank financing. We can renegotiate the terms of the note with you. We can renegotiate with a bank. We can sell the property. Generally, when I do sell it quickly, I'll give you an example. When I sold that one in one of the banks I'm going to show you later, I sold it in 2 months. I didn't intend to sell it that fast, but when I did, I paid a 1-month interest bonus, and I paid my investors 12%. So 12% with a 1-month bonus turns out to be 18%. 12 and 12 and 12 is 36. Divided by 2 months is 18%. So those investors received 18% of their money in the 2 months they were in that. They got in, they got out, and they were ready to jump into another deal. So that works out pretty well. My track record, this is what I talked about a little bit earlier. I've done well over 400 flips since 2009. In every single case, my investors have not only gotten all of their money back, but they've always gotten all of their guaranteed interest in every single time. So a lot of times when I've talked to hard money lenders before, and I've spoken to many real estate clubs, and hard money lender will pull me aside and say, hey, you can't do that, dude. You can't guarantee that. I say, yes, I can. I've done it 400 times. And if I guarantee that I'm going to give you your money back and the deal fails and I lose money and I give somebody back, then I'm guaranteeing it. So there's nothing wrong, illegal, unethical about saying I can guarantee, because I do it all the time. So that's what I do, because I'm doing good deals, and I don't buy it unless it's a smoking deal. And so it makes sense that I mitigate my risk by buying it at such a low price. I'll be the first to tell you that I've not profited in every deal, and I mentioned that earlier. Maybe I'll, 1 out of 10 or 1 out of 20, I'll have a bad deal. These things happen. You buy a property and it needs more rehab, or I'll give you an example. I bought a property one time, and when I comped it out, the other three had pools, and this one didn't have a pool. Well, that affected the value by about 30, 40 grand. So when I went to sell the property, it was 30 to 40 less than what I thought. I ended up losing money on the property. So these things do happen. Mistakes are made. I like to think I make less mistakes as I get older and more savvy in my real estate investing career, but mistakes are made. But keep in mind, again, the security of your investment is more important than my dollars in it, because I do well. I'll hit 19 good deals against one bad one. So it doesn't bother me that bad to, again, my credibility is much higher if I'm able to make sure everybody gets their money back plus their guaranteed interest. So if an investor is uncomfortable with a deal, or if by chance, and this rarely does happen, but if somebody needs their money back out early, it usually only takes me about 30 days to refinance somebody out. So even though we have a 1-year deed of trust and 6 months in, your daughter's getting married and it's going to cost 50 grand and you want your 100 grand back, no problem. Just give me the notice. I'll be able to find another funder to fund you back out of the deal. It might cost us a little bit of deed of trust and reconveyance back and forth, but not a problem. So that's something we can take care of. As I mentioned earlier, testimonials. I've done this so long, and I've got so many people that I've dealt with. In fact, many of them are in the Bay Area. And I told Seawing that, if you need me to come up to the Bay Area and do a live presentation, I'd be more than happy to do that. As he mentioned earlier, I remember fondly the Fremont Senior Center. There was a good group of people back there when we did those deals in 2003, 4, 5. There was a ton of people. Of course, then the market changed. But yeah, I'd be more than happy to meet with anybody individually. If somebody ever wants to come to Vegas, a lot of people, from Northern California, Southern Cal, always come to Vegas. But I can give out referrals of people I've dealt with. You can meet me personally. I have no problem with that. So I want to talk about the 4 kinds of deals that I'm working on, because one of these deals might fit better for you individually, because I haven't spoken to anybody personally, so I don't know your situation. But as we talk a little bit more privately, and when we do talk afterward, you might decide to migrate towards one type of investing more than another. But let me give you the 4 that I'm doing currently. And again, these change over the years for me, because if you look back 3 years ago, I bought HOA foreclosures in Las Vegas. Now, what does that mean? It means homeowners association foreclosures, not bank foreclosures, not tax sales, but HOA foreclosures. Well, I bought most of those at 10 to 20 cents on the dollar, and I sold most of those at about 40 to 60 cents on the dollar. Got clear title on a few. We lost 1 out of 100, and I still own about 15 out of 100, and I sold about 85 of those off. So in 2015, I actually earned 1.2 million that year. I earned about 800,000 last year. And these are all from real estate. That's all it is. I earned over $2 million in the last 2 years just from real estate investing. And when you're into something and you're very good at it and that's all you do, you see the niches and you move from niche to niche. But 2013 and 14, I was buying HOAs predominantly. 2014, I slowed up. 2015, I started doing commercial. Not that I wanted to do commercial. I saw a niche for it. I saw a lack of opportunity in fix and flips. I saw a lack of opportunity in HOA foreclosures. And so times change, and I change with the times. And that's one of the things I've done. I've done over 300 flips in the Las Vegas market alone from 2009 to 2014. But again, the market changed, and I've got to change with it. So getting to the 4 types of deals I'm currently working on. One is the only flips I'm doing maybe 1 a month in Las Vegas. So not that many, because I'm not finding them. It's very competitive, and the spreads aren't as good. So I'm only finding maybe 1 a month. But in Charlotte, North Carolina, it's another story. There's an interesting thing going on where there's a light rail that's going in from the uptown area. Now, they're downtown. They call it uptown. But from the uptown, downtown area going north, they're putting a light rail in. Well, all these areas around where the light rail stops are being regentrified. So these little bungalows that are built in 1950, 3 years ago, were being bought for 50 grand. Put in 100, you got 150 in, you sell it for 250. Well, now you got to pay 150. You got to put in 150, but you sell it for 400. So still very, very good spreads. Most of these are 1-year terms. We're paying 8 to 10% interest, and we have done many of these with equity participation. So again, it depends on what your situation is, whether you want to just get a straight return of interest and be hands off and be in first position, or whether you want to be an equity partner in the project and maybe defer your interest till the end, but make more at the end. So depends on what you want to do. So on the left side, you've got single family home flips in Charlotte, North Carolina. Most of those are taking anywhere from 6 months to a year to do because it's a major rehab. We're adding square footage, we're permitting, we're going through the legal channels. At the end of the day, we've got a product that you're going to see on HDTV. It's phenomenal. That 1950s bungalow turns into a beautiful, gorgeous house that we sell for 400 grand to a brand new couple that's buying their first house, or an executive banker that works in downtown Charlotte, which is a mile away. Just phenomenal stuff. But it's been a very, very good market for us. The second, I'm building now in Las Vegas. I'm building an office building for where my office is, and I'm also working on some dollar stores. Some of you might have seen some of the dollar stores, whether it's a 99-cent only, a Family Dollar, a Dollar Tree. There's about 5 or 6 major national chains. Well, I've got a connection with the dollar stores where they will actually come into an area and say, hey, we want to buy 5 properties in Las Vegas, for instance. And I know the guy, number one, the realtor that's looking for the space. I know Family Dollar or Dollar Tree or 99-cent, and they're looking for the space. And they don't want to buy the real estate. They want to lease it. So they'll come in with a 20-year lease or a 10-year lease with 3, 5, 4, 5-year options. And having that lease in place before we even commit to buy the property, we can now buy the property and pay cash for it. We can take that lease to the bank. The bank will give us a loan on the property, and then we can build the property. We have a lease, but let me give you some, these are rough numbers, but I'll give you an idea. Maybe it'll cost us $1.5 million to buy the land, build the building. But because we have the lease in place already, the cap rate, the value of that property is now $2.2 million because we've got the lease, the long-term lease in place. So we invested $1.5 million, but it's worth 2.2. So we've got 700,000 in equity. We can refinance it, hold it long-term. We can flip it, take the profits. We can flip it, 1031 it, buy something else. So we're looking again for investors to assist in buying into these deals, and these can all be done the same way. It can be, 10% interest. It can be equity participation. It can be whatever you want it to be, but we've got to be able to have the funders to do these. So these could be some good deals for you guys. Those are the first 2 types of investings that we're looking at. The third, and this is the one I've talked primarily about so far, is the under $1 million commercial, where I'm buying primarily bank-owned, distressed properties at really, really low values. Most of these are going to be between 200 and 600 grand. That's the majority of the ones I bought. Interest rates are 6 to 10% for the most part. Interest can be paid monthly, quarterly, annually, or deferred. Equity participation is potential, and the deals are mostly in the U.S. I haven't done anything out of the U.S., so I'm not against it, but I'm so busy that right now I don't want to travel internationally to look at other deals, although I do travel internationally, and I'm always looking. Give you an example. Last year I was in Panama for Thanksgiving, and I came across a part of Panama City called, I think it was Casco Nuevo or Casco Viejo, old section of Panama City, and I loved it. It was beautiful. These broken down buildings, and I'm like, wow, I'd like to buy those and turn it into something, but the pricing was a little bit off. They were way high for what they wanted, but I'm always looking anyways. But anyways, the left side of this commercial, that's where I've been concentrating on. So there's a lot of opportunity in that, and investors can be anywhere from 100,000 up to 500 to do the whole deal. It can be me and one person at 5. It can be 3 investors at 100 each, and we buy a $300,000 building. So we can tweak it a number of different ways. The last one I've got is with my brother, who I've done most of the flips with in North Carolina, or all the flips with, I should say. I'm doing 2 things in North Carolina, I should mention. I've been doing flips in North Carolina with another agent, done probably about 25 over the last 2 or 3 years. And then my brother's doing the regentrification, where he's buying the bungalows and adding on square footage. Those I'm doing with him. Well, in that case, we bought together some lots. It was a section of lots out in Asheville, North Carolina, and we got them for a smoking price. What it was a foreclosure. They lost them in 2007. They sat for many years. We took them over, bought them. We own the lots. Now it's time to build. So we'd be looking for some partners on funding. Now we might be able to, again, go to the bank and get bank financing because we've got good equity. But again, sometimes bank financing is a little more problematic. Sometimes it's easier to get private financing. The money's better for you, the investor. You'll be in great position again because you'll be secured against the properties. You'll be in first position ahead of everybody else. And then when we sell the properties, because these will be new construction, and there's a lack of inventory in Asheville, so these properties will sell very, very quickly. And then we pay you off. And if you want to do it again, we jump back in and do it again. So those are the 4 kinds of investing that we've got going on. Again, we can talk individually more about any of these that might interest you more than anything else. So on to slide 19. So money needed for deals. Typically, I use money in 100,000 increments. It can be as low as 50. I don't honestly like to go lower than that. If somebody's got 10, 20,000, it's not that I don't appreciate and honor or value that money. I do, but it just gets to be too much to have 5 investors at 20 each to buy a $100,000 property. But we're not even buying $100,000 properties. We're buying 200,000, 300,000 properties. So I would need 15 investors. It's too complicated, too much communication. It's easier to just have one investor at 300 grand or 3 investors at 100, as I've got in this bottom example. So that's how we work it as far as that goes. The risk of your principal, extremely low. Again, 400 deals, never lost money for an investor. We typically buy 20 to 50 cents on the dollar. Most of the deals we're doing are foreclosures. And we've got enough equity in the properties where I can guarantee the deals. In a lot of cases, I've had investors that want to be bought out of a deal, and I just pay them off personally and get them out of a deal. Or, as I said, I can refinance with another investor to come in. So pretty simple. Why commercial, not single-family homes? That's a great question, and we'll get to questions. So if you guys do have questions, you can jot them down as we talk, or wait till the end and we can do it. But I've done over 400 single-family home flips. The profits are overall pretty small. I mean, the ones I've done in Vegas have typically been 10 to 30,000. We've not done in Vegas anywhere I've added square footage. It's typically a buy at a discount, new carpet, new paint, new appliances, a distressed property, a short sale, a bank REO property. I mean, those are good profits. I'll give you an example. Back in 2010, 11, I was doing 5 to 7 properties a month. So if I'm making 10 grand and I did 5 a month, that's a nice income for the month to make 50 grand. The issue is, and I learned a valuable lesson from this, if I'd held on to those properties from 2010, they all went up at least 100 grand. I mean, the 300 flips I did times 100 grand, that's $30 million that I would have had now in equity had I not sold. So one of the things I like to do in my own personal investing is I like to constantly analyze what I'm doing, what's working, what's not working, what did I learn from the last deal I did, what did I learn from the last trend that I did or missed, so that when another trend comes around, I can spot it easier. And in this case, flipping was great. It paid the bills, but at the end of the day, had I had the wherewithal to hold on to these properties long term, I would have made a lot more money. So water under the bridge at this point, but at least I've learned from it. C, averaging over $100,000 a deal on commercial. The first deal I did 200, second deal I did 300, third deal I did 200, fourth deal 235. So I'm making a lot more money. They're a lot easier. There's a lot less competition. Commercial tenants are generally better because they're triple net, meaning that they're generally paying for the taxes, the maintenance, the insurance on the property. So it's a pretty hands-free investment for me. I get a check every month and don't worry about any of that other stuff. Makes a lot more sense. Same amount of work, 10 times the profits. So it makes a lot of sense to do commercial, and that's why I've graduated into commercial. So why do commercial deals exist? Let's talk about that for a second. So, I mean, trending behind, the whole crunch that we saw in 2007 obviously hit all the markets. But what we're starting to see now is commercial took a little bit longer to crunch, and we're still seeing some opportunity in commercial, whereas most of single families recovered. And like in Vegas, Vegas went, let's say an average house in Vegas was 300,000 in 2007, went down to 100,000 in 2010. Now it's doubled in value and gone from 100 to 200. So if you bought in 2010, you're in great shape. If you bought in 2004 and you held your house, you're still not in great shape because you're still way upside down. But if you bought anywhere between 2010 and now, you've got equity. So that's fabulous. Well, with commercial, some of those things didn't start to happen until 2010, 11, 12, about 2, 3 years behind what we saw with residential. So also some of these loans, took 8 to 10 years to adjust, and now they're adjusting. So there's still going to be commercial real estate opportunities for commercial flips and REOs that exist. And again, if we're staying in this little niche, I think we'll see less competition and more opportunity. So that's one of the things I'm doing that. Long-term loans adjusting, as I just mentioned. The other thought is, I don't know if you guys have seen this in your area, but I'm starting to see the group I'm working with bought a recent portfolio of 80 bank buildings located throughout the U.S. And a lot of banks are coming up and their leases are up, on their buildings. And they own the buildings, but they lease them, and the leases are up within a year or two. And they're selling off the buildings because they don't want to, rent the building anymore. I mean, people aren't going in. The millennial group's not going in to banks anymore. They're doing everything on their phone. So, the banks are now in grocery stores. So I think that the single story standalone banks are going to change over time, and you're not going to see as many of them. So that's great opportunity for us, because if we see that great bank building that's generally bought in a good area or built in a good area, we can buy that and repurpose it. We can sell it to a restaurant. We can repurpose it to a restaurant. We can subdivide it and put a hair salon on one side, an AT&T store on the other. So it gives us an opportunity if we're creative. And that's the cool thing about bank buildings, is they're pretty well built buildings. They're in good areas, and they've got good opportunity. Fresh and Easy I mentioned earlier, where again I can repurpose that building. I'll give you an example. Somebody came up with a great idea the other day. They said, hey, there's about 10 Fresh and Easies in Vegas that were sold. And one of my friends said, hey, go check the one out on Fort Apache in Vegas. And I drove by, and they're turning it into a gas station. Now I was like, wow, that's weird. A 14,000 square foot gas station? Well, Terrible Herbst, if you remember the name, if you've been to Vegas, has been around for a long time, and they run a lot of gas stations. They own a casino. They've been very successful in Vegas. But they've also had some mini marts and some pretty good size units for their gas stations. So they're building a gas station, but they're also going to have a grocery store element to it. So they're going to use that building for that. So I've got that idea. So now I reach out to my guys down in Phoenix and said, hey guys, I've got furniture stores looking at, I've got grocery stores. Let's look at gas stations. And so I'm talking to Terrible Herbst about the possibility of them either renting or buying the building that I own down in Phoenix. How many people have noticed sporting goods stores going under? I think there's only like one left. I think Dick's is the only one left. Everybody else is going out of business. Well, again, are people buying everything online? And so now these big sporting goods stores aren't being successful. There's going to be opportunity, so we've got to be smart and creative and look at those opportunities. Large chains are going out of business left and right. Years ago when I lived in LA, because I lived there up until 2004, you saw Mervyn's. Mervyn's was big, and Kohl's came along and Mervyn's is gone. So, I mean, there pretty much was the same thing, but Kohl's seemed to do a better job, and now Mervyn's is gone. So that would have been a great opportunity back, 15 years ago. Hedge funds, like the one I'm working with, they're buying bulk packages that are heavily discounted, and there's opportunity. And so that's the reason why commercial is going to exist. There's always going to be changes, just like in vehicles. When carburetors, go to fuel injection, the carburetor business is out of the business. All distributors, all manufacturers are gone. It's been obsolete in '86. It's gone. It's going to happen in commercial real estate. So we have to be on that trend to spot the opportunity when those big buildings go under. So on to next slide. So what happens if I'm unable to resell a property? Well, it hasn't happened yet. And again, because we're buying them so low, at worst case, I could resell it. You know what I'm saying? We could subdivide it. We could refinance it. There's so many opportunities. I could pay the investor off and get them out of the picture and keep it and hold it long term. Commercial does take a little longer than residential. It's not like residential where you do a 30-day, 90-day, 60-day rehab and then you resell the property. With commercial, if you're going to repurpose it, you've got to go through permitting. It's going to cost you a lot more money. You're going to have to reposition the property. Yes, but once you get it rented, the value goes up. Let me talk about the Fresh and Easy just for a second, and I'll roll through some numbers quickly, but I want you to get the general idea. If I take that 14,000 square foot building and rent it out for $1 a square foot, that's 14,000 square foot. If I multiply that by 12 months in a year, I think that's 168,000. If I divide that by a cap rate, a rate of return, which is a commercial standard of how we evaluate a property, of 8%. Let's do that real quick. $168,000 divided by 0.08% is 2.1 million. So that property that I bought for 650, and maybe I had to put in 200,000 in TIs, tenant improvements, toward assisting that renter to get this thing up to speed. So now I'm in for 650 plus 2 is 850. Let's call it 9. 2.19, that's $1.2 million in equity. I've almost doubled, more than doubled the investment, tripled the investment that I've got simply by putting a renter in place and reselling the investment, or again, refinancing with a bank. A bank will evaluate that and say it's worth 2.1. We'll give you 60% value. So let's multiply that. That's 1.26. So the bank gives me back 1.26. I pay off the funders at 650. I pay the 200 that I borrowed to repurpose it. I've still got about 400,000 left in my hand, or whatever that number is, in my pocket, not taxed on it. I've got positive cash flow, and I've got $800,000 equity in the property. I mean, that's a great deal. And I'm going to get to a deal in a minute that is very similar to that. The numbers are a little bit less, but it's the same kind of deal. So knowing what you can do and the opportunities you got in commercial is just phenomenal. So anyways, that's that. So let's move on to why commercial properties aren't mainstream. Well, one is experience. Like in my case, I didn't have experience with commercial, but I had a ton with residential. It was time for me to graduate. It was time for me to go to another level, and I did that. There's not a whole lot of people talking about commercial, teaching commercial. If you're interested in commercial, this is a fabulous way for you to learn about it. Fear, it's a bigger dollar. If you're buying a $300,000-$400,000 property, I mean, for you guys in Northern California, shit, you can't even buy a house for that amount of money. One of my investors that's got over $1 million with me, Gene Werner, he lives in San Jose, and his property, he said he's worth like 1.2 million. Well, he's got $1 million with me in deals where he's getting anywhere between 6 to 10%. But at the end of the day, it's crazy, to think you can buy a commercial bank building for $200,000 and then flip it for 4 or 5. So hey, I'm okay with playing that game, and I think most of you guys are too. And as far as money goes, we can talk more as we talk individually, but if you guys have lines of credit, if you happen to have money sitting in a bank account, if you have friends that have money, it's a great way for us to be able to get a good return for the investors' money. We secure them, and we get really, really good returns on our money based on what we're doing. Second, of course, bigger dollars. Commercial is bigger dollars than residential. What I'm talking about, again, is a Vegas flip for 100 versus a commercial flip for 3 or 4. It's 4 times more. But, for you guys, a $400,000 property is, you probably can't get one in San Jose. Maybe you can now after the flood up there. But at the end of the day, it's an interesting scenario. But I'm able to buy commercial properties all over the U.S. for these low amounts. I'll give you an example. I bought a mortuary, an existing mortuary. You're going to like this one. In Florida, right outside of Orlando, about 6 months ago for $350. It was a similar deal after I bought that other one for $350 in Vegas. This one's listed at $550. I offered $350. They came back at $360, I think, and I did an inspection report. I said, you need a new roof, you need this, you need that. I got it at $355. So I paid $355. The bank wanted to sell it. Long story short, the gentleman who had bought it and built it lost it to the bank 5 years ago. He stayed in place. He paid rent for 5 years. I bought it from the bank. He's paying me rent now. I raised the rent to where I'm making a nice cash flow, and I'm selling the property back to him. So it makes it, and it's his wife that's buying it because it's a different LLC because he had a foreclosure. But the point is, I'm selling it for $700,000 back to him because he's got a viable business that's profiting and doing well. I paid $355. I sell it for $7. Bingo, doubled my money. And education, last thing, why they're not profit, or why commercial properties aren't mainstream, is because a lot of people don't know about them, and there's a lack of education on them. So I'm educating you guys. Could you go out and do it yourself? Of course, anybody can take any of my ideas and do it yourself. But having a partner like me, somebody that's out there looking and finding, is a better way to go. I always try to value the people that are doing business. Example, if I find a realtor that brings me a deal, he'll get full commission. I'm not going to try to squeeze him for commission. If I find somebody that brings me a deal that's a wholesale deal, I'll pay them the value for them bringing me a deal. I'll give you an example. I just did that on a property in Vegas where a newbie, I call them, they've never done a deal, found me a deal. It's a condo valued at 110. They got it tied up at 70. And they said, I don't know what to do. I don't have the money to close on it. I said, well, I'll tell you what, I'll pay you $2,000 for it, for an assignment fee. And they said, oh, that's not enough. How about five? I said, yeah, five's fine, no problem. So I paid them five. Well, I'm going to make, at the end of the day, with buying and selling and closing costs and very little rehab, I'll probably make about 25. But if I make 25 and subtract five, I make 20, they make five. Now, why did I make four times as much as they did? Because I had the money, the experience, the ability to find the money. Even if I didn't have the money, I had the ability to say yes to the deal and take it over from them and take it off their hands and have them assign it to me, because I've done so many deals that I knew that, hey, that's got such equity, I will find the money. And so one of my funders, one of the guys that did one of the deals earlier that I talked about, is in my office, and I said, hey, I got a new deal, Gene. I need money for about a month because I've already got a buyer for it. I've actually resold it already within a month. I said, I need money. He goes, no, I'm saving it for another deal. I go, look, I only need it for a month. I'll pay you $1,000 on 70 grand. Now, if you look at that number, I haven't even calculated. 1,000 divided by 70,000 equals 14% interest. That's good interest. So he's going to get 14%. But he's in, he's out quick, he gets his money, and he's got a good return, and not a bad way to go. So that's what I do. But having the ability to look at something, find the deal, jump on it, makes a lot of sense. And so people get paid for their value, and my value is that I can find deals, I can jump on deals, I can create deals, I can find money. So it makes sense. So on to, we're almost near the end, actually, so we're in pretty good shape. Can I get out early if I need to? I mentioned that earlier. Yes, it rarely happens, but if somebody needs out, usually within 30 days, not a problem. No penalty. Maybe it'll cost us, $100, $200 for the attorney to do some recording and some reassigning and whatnot, minor cost, but we can get you out pretty quick. So how do I find the deals? Well, that's a good question. I haven't talked about that yet, other than bank. I told you about bank foreclosures, but years of relationships through agents. Agents throughout the U.S., agents that are local, agents that primarily are commercial agents, internet research. I typically look at about 50 deals a day, and this is quick. I mean, I'm talking cursory looks, where I'll quickly look at a deal. I look at the price of it. Is it rented? Is it vacant? And I have to make a split decision. If it's worth anything, I'll search to get more information on it. Honestly, 49 out of 50 don't even make it to the second step. So it might take me all of 10 minutes to look at those 50 properties. And then the one that might look good, I might send it out for more information, and then I'll research it a little bit more and go from there. Foreclosures, as I mentioned, 19 out of 20 that I bought have probably all been foreclosures. Hedge funds, mini hedge funds, bank contacts. Bank contacts is the way to go, because if you can find small banks in small America and say, hey, do you guys have any commercial properties that you want to part with? Oh, yeah, we have this bank. We don't know what to do with it, blah, blah, blah. Bingo, you step in, you take it off their hands, they call it a day. Makes sense. These are the two bank deals that I highlighted and wanted to talk to you guys about and show you, because I'm going to show you a couple different scenarios. So the one on the left, the Georgia bank deal, this one I bought for $200,000. Actually, I bought both these banks together with a mini hedge fund. And I was trying to buy three. I was trying to buy the Georgia bank building at a price, and then I found out the parking lot wasn't included. And so I lowered my price, and they said, that's too low. But I got another bank building. Let me look at that one. Okay, great. And then they had a third one. I said, well, let me look at the third one. So I made an offer for all three of them. But the third one happened to be sold to another buyer, so I didn't get that. But I ended up paying $200 for the building on the left and $150 for the one on the right. So for $350, I bought two bank buildings. At the time, both bank buildings were leased out. The one on the left, the Georgia one, was leased out for $4,000 a month, but they were moving out within 6 months. The one on the right, they were there for almost a year, and they were paying also $4,000, but they were moving out at the end of the year. So the one on the left, I sold it within 2 months. I didn't intend to sell it. I really was thinking about remodeling it and finding another tenant. It's a 23,000 square foot bank building. No, 13,000. The flyer that was sent to me from the agent that promoted it said 23,000. When we got there, we measured it out, and we talked to the contractor that did some work on it, and it turned to be 13. Maybe it was a typo, but it's a 13,000. So if you look at the numbers again, it's a $200,000 divided by 13,000 square foot is $15 a square foot. And interesting story on it, what the contractor I actually talked to rehabbed the whole building 2 years ago. and the property, they put it like 150 grand into rehabbing the building. But the bank had it. Again, they bought it in a package. They want to get rid of it. They took my little $200,000 property. The bank was due to move out. I ended up selling it to the bank across the street. There was 5 banks in this little town, and the bank across the street didn't want another bank to move in. And so they paid $490,000 for it. No realtors involved. I made literally a little under $300,000 for that property in 2 months. Plus I made 2 months in rent payments minus my interest payments. So I made about 290 grand on it. Unbelievable. In 2 months. Didn't touch it. I did visit it. One of the things I do, and I forgot to mention this, and I'm glad I just reminded myself, that I typically don't look at these properties until I get them under contract. Because again, if I'm going after 50 properties a month, I don't have time to fly around the country. I work under contract first, and once it's under contract and I've got that due diligence period of usually 2 weeks and then 2 more weeks to close, I'll get on a plane and fly out and check it out. So I've been to Cleveland to look at that bank. I went to Georgia to look at that bank, and I liked what I saw, and I ended up buying the properties. Once in a while, I'll walk away, but usually what will happen if I see a property and it's really bad, I'll lower my price. If I lower my price and they don't like my lower price, I walk away. If they like my lower price, they take it, they lower the price, and I end up getting a better deal. So that's the way I work it. The Cleveland Bank building, as I said, a little bit different. The bank moved out in November. I quickly got it rented, and actually it got re-rented out March 1st, so it's re-rented. We've got it re-rented at $32,000 annual triple net lease, which turns out if you look at 6% cap rate, the value is about $533. Now let's take that same number, 32,000, and let's divide it by an 8% cap rate. So divide it by 0.08. That's $400,000. All right. So somebody might look at it and say, hey, that's not worth a 6 cap. It's an 8 cap. Well, then it's only worth 400 grand. Well, I paid 150 for it. I financed it with a $100,000 funder, and I put 50 of my own money into it. So I've got 50. So I can sell it now that I've got this new bank in there that's got a 5-year lease with 4 5-year options. They could be there for the next 25 years. They can move out in 5 years. But the point is, they're there, and when you get a brand new tenant moving in with a long-term lease, great time to sell the investment. I could hold it. I could fund out that funder, pay them off. A lot of things I can do. So let's go to the next slide, and we'll elaborate a little bit. So the Georgia Bank building was interesting, too, because if you look and you see where the tree is on the left, Georgia Bank building, right to the right of the tree, that little section was actually a florist. So when I sold that bank building, I could have kept the florist because they didn't want the florist. They only wanted the bank. And the florist was worth about, I figured about 75 grand alone, even though I sold the bank for what did I sell it for, 490. I could have kept that. I probably could have sold the bank for 490, kept the florist for 75, but I said, I'm not greedy. Let's just sell it and call it a day and move on. So I sold it and got rid of it. But it did include that. The other caveat, too, is if you look at the second floor, the bank is a 2-story building. The second floor was it was a gray shell, you know what I mean? It wasn't built out. It was in very good shape. They had a fire in there, say 2-3 years ago, and they redid a lot of it. And the second floor was in very good shape. The bank was built about 100 years ago. It's historical. So that, one of those deals where they wouldn't tear it down. They had to rebuild it. So I could have built out the second floor. And there was also an insurance agency on the first floor. If you look to the tree, the first window to the right there is a little insurance agency. So by keeping it and subdividing it out, I could have got the value up, I figured, to about $800,000 between a bank renting it, an insurance agency, second floor, and the florist. But again, I'm like, do I do all that work and make an extra 400 or 500 grand and take a year or two, or do I just take a quick 300 and call it a day? Well, my decision. I took 300 and called it a day and moved on to the next deal. So that's what I did. For the Cleveland Bank building, that building was built in 1904. It's a historic building in Cleveland. It's about a mile outside of downtown. As I said, that's the story. It was a Key Bank when I bought it. Key moved out, and Huntington's the new bank that's moved in. So let's move on. Let me give you the same deals. If we were to do these differently, or the way I did them, on the Georgia Bank, I took the profit and called it a day. Now, the negative to that is I'm going to have a big tax consequence. I'm going to owe about 150 grand in taxes in a month. But I needed the money to do some other deals, so I took the money out, and I'm doing other deals. If I 1031'd it, again, I would have had no tax consequences. Now, with the Cleveland Bank building, that's a little different. Now that I've got it. I can sell it for anywhere between a low of 400 to a high of 550-ish. I can pay off the funder. I can profit. I can refinance it at, let's say, 250, still pay off the investor, put 150 in my pocket, all right, hold it with equity in place, and have a positive cash flow. So that's a good one to hold long term in my portfolio. So I've got many options with that one. And that's the cool thing about repurposing a building or re-renting a building and then deciding what you want to do with it. I mean, I could pay off the 100 grand and have no debt and have, 3,000 a month coming in. And that's another way to do it too. I can do that, but I typically like to use my money because if I can buy something with a couple hundred in equity, I'll take the equity out of it so I can buy something else with a couple hundred in equity. That's the way I typically do it. So this was interesting. Let's talk through, let's say I did an equity participation deal on this. Funny story on the Georgia bank, I actually had a partner on that and I offered it to him and he said, oh, I don't like it. It's a small town, blah, blah, blah. So he didn't do it. Well, I knew it was a home run. So I said, all right, I'll do it alone. No problem. So I did it alone. 2 investors, 100,000 each. In that case, I paid him 12% because it was already rented and I was comfortable with that. And it was 2 months. Their money was in and out, as I said, and I paid them a month bonus. So they actually made 18% of their money. So 2,666 was my interest per, what did I say, 8%? This is if I was doing equity participation. Sorry, I lost my train of thought for a second. So if I was doing equity participation and I paid an 8% interest, you would have got 2,666. And then let's say you made 20% of the profits. 290 is the profit. 10% of that is 29 grand. You would have made 29 grand plus the interest. You would have made times, why do I have times 6? Oh, it took 6 months. What am I thinking here? 31. Oh, I'm just figuring out what the annualized rate is. That's what that was. So you would have made an annualized rate of 95% on your money, to make a $31,000 return for being in a property for a few months and ending up making that kind of money would have been a smoking return. So if that's the way we worked it with equity split, it would have worked out fabulous. Now, again, if we did that, of course, I would have said no interest. I'm not paying interest. It's going to take me typically, 2 months to a year to repurpose or resell or find a new renter. In this case, it was quicker than I thought. I didn't think it'd be 2 months. I thought it would be 6 months or longer, but sometimes it works that way. If that took a year, then, you still would have made 31,000 divided by 2. It would have been a, 16% return annually for a year. So it still would have been a good return. So on the other side, the Cleveland, if we sold the Cleveland at 495 and you were involved as the $150,000 investor and you got your interest at 8% for the year, 12 grand, you made 10% of the profits of 315, which is 31. 31 plus 12 is 43. Divided by your 150 would have been a 29% return if that took us a year. So again, another good investment. So you can see that being an equity partner, you make a lot more money. I'm willing to go both ways with people. It really depends upon the investor and what you're looking for. I typically don't put a lot into the deal. What I put into it is finding it. I put in the rehab money in a lot of cases. In most cases, I put in the equity, the sweat equity of going back and forth and finding the purpose, the repurpose, all that stuff. You typically are putting in most of the money. You're secured. You're guaranteed you're going to get paid first. So you have less risk than I do in that regard, but you have more risk because you have more money into it. But at the end of the day, you make a lower return if you look at the percentage that I make because I have less money into it and I make a bigger return. But at the same time, you're more protected. So it really depends how you look at it. But if you look at my track record and what I've done, at the end of the day, it's worked out pretty well. So we're at about an hour so far. I'm almost done. Actually, this is the last real slide, and let's just talk about this. So if somebody is interested in looking at any of the scenarios that I talked about, what would be next? Well, simply give me an email, copy C-Wing on it, of course. We've got to keep C-Wing in the loop. We can chat individually. I want to find out what your goals are with your investing, what types of assets you have to work with, what you want to do. It's that easy. I'm a very busy guy, but obviously I've got time. So, the call might be late in the day. It might be a Saturday. It might be a Sunday. I typically come in about 4 in the morning and I work from 4 to 8, just catching up from the day before. And then 8 to 5 is a blur for the most part, but usually in the late afternoon it slows down. Weekends are better time for me. I catch up. I've got more time. So that's the way it typically works. Last slide, back to, we'll get to questions in a second. My information is there to talk about questions. If somebody did have a question, good time to put it in the chat section. Just chat it in there. I'll address any questions that come in. Sometimes I get them, sometimes I don't. It depends. I think there's only 7 or 8 people on the webinar, so it's not a ton of people, 8 people. But if you've got questions, again, you can always individually email me or call me. We'll set up an appointment. But I'll wait a second. Seawing, did you want to add anything? I know I talked pretty much the whole time, but you want to make any comments at all?
Yeah, no, it was a very, very informative webinar. Even I learned a lot. So I'm sure the audience will agree with me. So yeah, right now we have exceeded 1 hour. I think since we have not received any kind of questions, they have your email address, they have your phone number, so they have my contact information as well. They could email us those questions. But yeah, I think why don't we conclude this webinar and go from there. And again, thank you so much for this great presentation.
One quick thought, Seawing, just to mention that we did record this. So I'm going to, as soon as we're done here, I'm going to click the stop recording. I'll send you the link if anybody wants to get the link of this. And you can send it back out to your database of people that registered. We can share the link, and I think it's going to be a good, you can listen to it again at your own leisure if you want to go back over some of the PowerPoints and analyze it. Feel free to do that. That's a great way to do it.
Yeah, great. Perfect. Sounds great. Thank you so much for your time, Glenn, and thank you everyone for attending, and hope you receive a lot of value from this educational event. I know I did, and so the next step is to talk to Glenn or myself and create your action plan, execute on your plan, and put your money to work and make more money for your financial future. So thank you so much. Thank you, Glenn, and have a nice day and good luck.
Thank you very much, Seawing, and thanks everybody. We'll all talk to you soon. Bye-bye.